Welcome everyone to the Responsible Bytes podcast, the podcast where we talk about all things safe and responsible technology. I'm your host, Dr. Zena Assaad, and today I am joined by an award-winning science communicator, Alison Kershaw. Welcome to the podcast, Alison.
Thanks for having me, Zena. It's lovely to be here.
It's wonderful to have you on the podcast. Now, you are an award-winning science communicator, and you've been doing science communication for decades, and you have, I don't know if it's the joy of being able to now do science communication in an age of AI. And generative AI in particular has been framed as a really positive thing for science communication because people talk about it as a really effective way of being able to simplify complex topics. But from my perspective, that seems to be the sole purpose of science communication to begin with. So what is the actual benefit of having something like generative AI a part of science communication?
Well, I have to say I agree with you that the point of science communication is to make complex things understandable to the general public. And yes, generative AI can simplify complex topics. But I was having a conversation last week with someone who didn't really understand what ChatGPT was and did not understand that ChatGPT is not smart and that what it does is it looks for patterns in language and puts words that it thinks go together, but it has no idea what any of those symbols and the symbols, when you put them together, make words and the words make sentences. It has no idea. And she was like, oh, it's not connected to the internet? And I'm like, well, kind of.
So is it like just this blind faith kind of that it was absolutely accurate?
Yeah. She had no idea that ChatGPT is about patterns and not about going to the internet and presenting you with an answer. And this is a person with a science degree working in a hospital. And so for me, that's a massive red flag. And I think about the people who don't get an opportunity to have a conversation with someone like me, or who aren't included in conversations at all about any of this stuff. So, yes, generative AI can make complex things a bit more simple, but what you need is you need a human. It's that thing of there are technologies that can find cancers better than humans, and that's great. But I still want a human to tell me I have cancer. I don't want to get, a text notification, hashtag sorry, hashtag you have cancer. There's always got to be humans because we as humans love stories and love sharing, and context is important. So ChatGPT or any of the generative AIs, they have no idea what your context is. What's your cultural background? Do you actually understand what the internet is? All of those things. So, yeah, and I've used some image generators because they're hilarious and everybody ends up with six fingers and really distorted faces.
Mine always end up really scary.
Yeah.
I always end up with these really morbid, scary things.
Yeah, and faces that, that look like they're melting.
Well, no, because I was trying to ask a generative AI, an AI image generator once to generate an image of somebody talking to, I needed something of like somebody speaking to a school of students.
Yep.
And it was the creepiest thing you have ever seen. The guy was like hunched over and everything was dark and all the kids looked terrified. And I was like, what did I put into this prompt?
Those sorts of things can be really great to start a conversation about the these are great, but they do have limitations. And
They do.
So, yeah.
Do you find it funny when you are using your science communication skills to explain to people why something like generative AI is actually limited for science communication?
Yeah, because the way it's often reported, AI is going to save us, and AI is sequencing proteins. And, for anybody watching as well as listening, I don't have a lot of hair at the moment because I've been having chemotherapy for breast cancer. And I know that, there are supercomputers that are sequencing proteins and all sorts of things, and the whole notion of personalized medicine, the potential is enormous and literally life-changing and life-saving. But we're not there yet.
No,
But
we're
the
not.
way it gets reported, we're there. And, AI is going to fix everything. And it's like, is it? Really? I see this sounds really familiar. Like every new thing, every new tech bro thing, it's going to save the world. It's going to change the way we do business. It's going to change the way we live our lives.
And it doesn't usually add up to
No.
that. Especially we are seeing, so you kind of touched on the inaccuracies of generative AI. What do these inaccuracies do for the integrity of science communication when we use them in place of human-based science communication?
Oh, well, yeah, this is where we get into the whole misinformation. And I mean, whoever came up with the notion that artificial intelligence hallucinates rather than actually what it is produces garbage.
I believe it was Sam Altman, just to clarify. I believe he
okay,
said it at a conference, and he said it was part of the quote-unquote magic of AI.
Well,
yeah,
magical bullshit. Yeah, I mean,
magical
it's marketing
bullshit. Copyright Alison Kershaw 2025.
I want it on a t-shirt. But the notion, that they've actually created sort of user-friendly language around this isn't going to get it right all the time and we're going to call it a hallucination. I mean, that's marketing genius.
It's brilliant marketing.
But, most people don't understand what that means or what the implications are. As a cancer patient, I have resisted the urge to sort of ask ChatGPT about, how to cure my cancer because I know it will just enrage me and there is nothing I can do about it. It might spit out, stuff about green juices and, meditation, which, if that's your thing, great. It's not my thing. But yeah, people who are not fully aware of what the tool they're using actually is will just believe it, and it could be just utter garbage, but there's no way for any of these, large language models or the generative AI stuff to go, this is our best guess. You might want to go and double check that, like on a proper website.
Well, that's not a very good marketing agenda, is it? To say, this is our best guess, please fact check.
Yeah.
Although it now, I believe it now says something on the bottom, I'm pretty sure, when you put a prompt into ChatGPT, especially if it's around, if you're asking for medical advice, I believe it now says on the bottom, like, ChatGPT is not a medical professional. It's something along those lines.
Oh, yeah. It'll have
that's
some
like a
sort
legal liability thing rather than a consumer thing, right? Like, we don't actually care about the customer. We just care that you can't sue us.
Yeah. Yeah. That is all about somebody's, family, suing Sam Altman or whoever.
And he was like, oh, crap, well, I better put a tagline in.
Yeah. And so the lawyers are like, you just need to put this little thing at the bottom to go, it's not our fault if you don't know how to use this tool, or that you probably shouldn't use this tool at all, So,
I mean, you can use it for some things within reason, right? Like, I love using it to help me write my social media posts. I hate writing social media posts, and I think ChatGPT does. I never end up using the exact thing ChatGPT gives me because it's a little bit too, I don't know what the pleasant word is to use here. Crap, I guess. I feel like crap has been maybe the word of the day for today's episode. But I always edit it. It gives me a good starting point, and then I just edit it from there. That's like a reasonable use of ChatGPT. But like you were saying, using ChatGPT to try and find cures to cancer, probably not an effective use of ChatGPT.
Yeah, and I've done the same. ChatGPT can be really good for sort of writer's block. Write me a paragraph on, and even if it is utter garbage, you're like, well, this is utter garbage. And you start editing, and then you're like, oh, look, I've written the thing. Excellent.
It gives you confidence. You're like, well, that's shit. I can do better than that. Bam, bam, bam.
I'm like, do you know what I'm talking about? And that's the thing. It can be, but you and I both know how it works, its limitations, that, it's not to be heavily relied on. It's one of many tools. Whereas if you read the marketing material, it's going to save us all, and companies are investing in AI, and, people are worried about their jobs, and so this is where it starts to really get a bit sort of complicated, and you actually need a human to explain what is going on.
Well, the recent MIT study has come out in the last couple of weeks that demonstrated that thus far there has been no return on investment on AI, which is really interesting because it's posited as a really positive technology for economic growth, right? Like when they talk about investing in AI and why governments should invest in AI, they always talk about the economic growth. But the funny part about it is that that conversation is balanced with conversations about AI is taking your job. And then also we have these studies coming out saying, well, actually there's been no return on investment. And so the logic behind that kind of argument fades really quickly.
It's like there's a bunch of tech bros out there, like basically selling really expensive snake oil. And I mean, the reality is that the phrase snake oil actually comes from the fact people used to sell snake oil as a curative treatment for, 1,000,001 things. But it's that thing of, every new technology, like it's going to fix everything, it's going to save us time, the nature of work will change. And that may eventually be true, but honestly, probably not in your or my lifetime.
No, I agree with you. I think I always refer to it as a pendulum swing, and I think we're all the way on one end, and I think it will peter out. But there is also the case of everybody is a sucker for something when it comes to sales and marketing. So I'm really big on skincare. A friend of mine and I a couple of years ago bought dirt off the internet to drink because apparently it helped with toxins and like the elasticity of your skin. It was horrific.
Right.
We were literally drinking dirt, but
Sure.
we were sold on that. And somebody else might listen to this and think that is the most ridiculous thing. And objectively it is. I need to just say this, like with hindsight,
Sure.
It was ridiculous. I drank dirt. But that's the way that I view people's positive thinking about AI. I'm like, this is ridiculous. How
Yeah.
can you buy into it? It's because everybody has their thing. And if you actually look at the marketing of AI, it's got multiple things. People talk about, like you said, it changes the way we work. It'll save you time. It'll boost the economy. Like there are multiple different selling points for AI that at least
Yeah.
one is bound to resonate with someone.
Exactly. And the thing for me is that we have to be careful not to drink the Kool-Aid. That we have to remember that the people who are telling us that this thing is amazing and great are the people who are making money from the thing that they are telling us is amazing and great. And my particular sort of focus in science communication is on the people who are often not involved in any of these conversations. I think about, say, like my grandmother, who would have been 105 this year if she was still alive. But, she left school very early. I mean, she was literate, but, not well educated. And I can remember she emigrated from the UK in 1965 to Australia. I can remember showing her a webcam of the Sheffield city centre where she was born and grew up, and her brain had no frame of reference for what was happening. And she was genuinely like, so what, and she was leaning in, and I'm like, so there is a camera in Sheffield, and then they put it on the internet and we can look at it. She was like,
I don't understand.
yeah, and, I remember showing her my first iPhone and she just thought it was amazing. But I also remember showing my dad my first iPhone. And the family joke is he's been working in computers so long, he broke his wrist opening a packet of punch cards. He was trying to open a packet of punch cards and got irritated when it didn't cooperate and snapped his hand back and hit it on a filing cabinet and broke his wrist. So my dad has been working in computers a really long time. I showed him my iPhone and he wasn't at all impressed with the phone, but he was really impressed that it knew where it was in space.
Oh, interesting.
So if you turn the screen would reorientate and stuff. And he's like, that is really cool technology. Like, that's very complicated. And I was like, oh, okay. Yes. Thinking about it.
I like what you said about the frame of reference with your grandma and now hearing your dad's story as well, because, for me, that wasn't even something I considered to be the most impressive thing about a smartphone. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
But it's that frame of reference.
Yeah. And so for my grandmother, having a phone in my pocket, that wasn't attached to the wall, like that was amazing. And for my dad, it was like, well, it knows where it is in space. Like, he remembers, like, when he was talking about having different printers to do portrait and landscape because they couldn't get it to the printing to, reorientate itself. So the things that impressed my dad were not the things that impressed my grandmother. And, I think the things that would impress her now about ChatGPT or, any of the image generators are not the things that impress my dad. And in fact, my dad doesn't use any of the generative AI because he's like, well, it's not there yet.
Yeah.
Because, we're basically being testers for it. It's learning from us. and most people don't understand that.
And you were talking before when you shared the story about your grandma and you were trying to explain how this webcam worked, and you were saying she had no frame of reference for it, and
No.
you were really trying to give her some kind of frame of reference. And a couple of years ago, I was a part of the ABC Top 5 Science Residency Program, which I recommend to anyone. It's a fantastic program. But one of the activities we did with that was we were given a task where we were in a group of 3 and one person had to pretend that they had traveled into the future and they had come from a time pre-electricity, and we had to explain how an X-ray worked. And it sounds like a simple task, and it was so hard. It was so hard to explain how an X-ray works. And I think this is one of the fundamental skills of science communication, really, is explaining a very complex thing to someone who doesn't have the frame of reference for that thing. And that's just not something that generative AI can do. Like if you put into ChatGPT, how does a webcam work? You're not going to get a very nuanced and simplified version that is relative to somebody's frame of reference. You're going to get a very generic, pretty much a techie kind of answer.
Yeah.
And this is really, I think, what we're losing with using generative AI for science communication.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, the thing is, you will probably get an answer, like you say, a technical answer. There's this widget and then that widget, and it uses this internet protocol and blah, blah, blah. Great. But I would probably struggle with the technical information that it would spit out about how a webcam works. But, I can, I was able to sit with my grandmother and basically tell her a story, like there is a camera and it's on the top of the town hall. And then I had to explain what the internet is. And I'm like, it's a whole bunch of computers that are connected and they talk to each other. And she's like, oh, she always thought I was smart because I worked with computers. I was like, okay, yeah, I'll take that.
When I told my grandma I was studying engineering, she's like, oh, you can build me a house. And I was like, probably not, but okay.
Yeah. I can tell you about the concrete in the house.
I can tell you about the frames and the structure and load-bearing beams, but I don't know how a drill works, so I don't think I'd get very far trying to build you a house.
Yeah. And that's the thing. Yeah, I was involved in a project here in Adelaide when they were beginning the rollout of the National Broadband Network. And they selected around the country different sites to do a test rollout. And I know Armidale was one because that was sort of a university town, so they wanted to see kind of how that worked. And in South Australia, a town called Wollonga, which is probably about 45 minutes south of Adelaide, and it's semi-rural. There's lots of vines and, you're heading towards McLaren Vale and the wine area. And they selected it because it's semi-rural, and lots of places have really long driveways, which was an issue they knew they had to kind of get their heads around. And so I was part of a state government program to get Wollonga NBN ready. And so I did some workshops in the Wollonga Library. And I think the oldest person I worked with was 82. And we set her up a Gmail account, and she sent an email to her grandson in the UK and got a reply. And we all cried. But to get to that point, I've got a photo somewhere of this whiteboard of me sort of explaining what the internet is really simply. Like, it's a whole bunch of computers, because the thing that I had not realized was one of the biggest fears of these predominantly older potential NBN users was they were scared of breaking the internet. And, you know, there's nothing that a cup of tea and a piece of cake doesn't help fix. So
Yeah,
we
I
would
agree with
have
that. I
a cup
think
of
a cup of tea
tea
can
and a
cure
piece of
anything.
cake, and I'd be like, tell me more about like what this whole breaking the internet thing. And they had either seen in movies or, you know, their kids had talked about, you know, the blue screen of death. And I was like, oh, right. Yeah. Okay. That makes sense. So their experience of technology, or their secondhand experience of technology, is it just not working? And I mean, I remember, I think I was about 9, when my dad brought home a Commodore 64. And I remember like having to actually say to, you know, uni lecturers, I did do the essay and then it just wasn't there, you know, and they're like, what happened? I'm like, I don't know. So these people had either experience or secondhand experience of stuff just breaking. And so we sat down and I filled a whiteboard with a really basic, you know, this is the internet. It's a whole bunch of computers and they talk to each other, and the internet doesn't live anywhere, because that was the thing. They thought it was like, you know, it's that IT crowd, you know, this is the internet.
Yeah.
This little black box. And I'm like,
Honestly,
no.
I want to cry hearing this story, especially the fact that she thought she was going to break the internet. Oh
Oh,
my
I
God.
get that. Yeah, I used to get that all the time. I don't want to break anything.
Well,
You are not
you
going to
don't
break
have that much
anything.
power when sending an email.
Yeah, yeah. You know, and it's like, you're not going to break it. You're probably not even going to, like, you know, and they're like, well, what about this computer? And I'm like, it's fine. It'll be fine.
You know what's really interesting is hearing your stories. I'm amazed at how much I have taken for granted the tech literacy that I grew up with. By the time we had our first computer, it wasn't that new, right? It was the 90s. And we had
Mm.
the internet. The things I remember is not being able to use the phone and the internet at the same time. And
Yeah.
that was more an inconvenience than anything else, right? But we
Get off
didn't,
the phone.
yeah, we didn't really
Yeah.
have these issues of worrying that we were going to break the internet. So I think that's really what your stories are kind of
Yeah. And that was,
showing
and
for
that,
me.
yeah. And that's the thing about like real science communication. Quite often, it's a cup of tea and a piece of cake and a whiteboard, you know, and reassuring people, and no such thing as a dumb question. It's that thing of, if you don't know, you don't know.
Yeah.
And that's okay, because we'll work it out together, you know. And so I would spend a lot of time sort of saying, well, do you know how a car works? And they're like, well, there's an engine and there's some spark plugs. And I'm like, great. And now you know, and you know where the petrol goes and the water for the squirty thing. And really that's enough. And in terms of using the internet and computers, you know where the petrol goes, you know where the water goes for the squirty thing, and that's enough. You are not going to need to take it apart. You're not going to need to repair it. We're just going to drive. And so using, you know, analogies and things that are familiar, like, I'm just going to teach you to drive. I am not going to teach you to be a mechanic. They'll be like, okay. And that made sense, because there were concerns that, you know, would be super technical and, you know, they'd have to take things apart. And I'm like, no.
You
I'm
don't need that
just
level of information.
Exactly. You know, there are people who train and have skills and the right tools and whatnot. This is why we have mechanics. And quite often science communication can actually be about sort of reassurance as well. They may have read something. There was one woman we were talking about. It's when the airlines started to introduce, it would cost more money. It would cost $10 more to book a ticket over the phone. So it was cheaper to book your flight online.
Mm-hmm.
And there were people
Was this an
who,
incentive to get people to stop calling to book
this
and to
is
use the
when
online system?
the airlines were like call centres are expensive, and we'll
Let's make
push
you do
everyone.
this yourself.
Yeah,
Which I appreciate because I'm of the generation of don't call me. I don't want to speak on the phone. I would much rather just book something online.
Yeah.
But my parents absolutely hate doing things online. They would much rather just pick up the phone, call someone, and just have it done in 10 minutes.
Absolutely. And the people in Wollonga, some of them were genuinely concerned about the Russian mafia stealing their identity.
I'm laughing, but at the same time, this goes back to that frame of reference point, right? Like, I'm laughing also as somebody who bought dirt off the internet because it has skincare benefits. So everyone has their frame of reference. For these people, it was the Russian mafia.
And the thing was, it used to be sort of the running gag that as much as it would pain me, I would have to watch things like A Current Affair, because they would have this, like, the Russian mafia is stealing, and then you'd be like, okay, so what they didn't say and the bit that they missed, and it would have been really helpful if they had said something else.
Maybe we should do a separate podcast episode talking about how much A Current Affair has made your science communication job more difficult.
Yeah. Either it's a miracle cure, or the Russians are going to steal your identity. So we then had to talk about identity theft and what that actually meant, and that actually the experience in Australia is that identity theft is actually usually done by someone you know. And so technically, say, if I went into your office and got a credit card out of your handbag and bought Oasis tickets, that's identity theft. I mean, it's also theft, but I have stolen your identity to purchase these tickets. Yeah. And so we then, had this big conversation over tea and cake about what identity theft is and what the risks are about putting a credit card details, So I explained, I have a credit card that is not attached to any of my bank accounts. So if the details get stolen, I think I had like a $5,000 limit and they could go nuts and then it would just not work. And yeah. Like, oh, right. Okay. I said, so, and the whole thing of, I mean, I remember when you could first set up a Facebook account and it would ask you for your home address.
I don't remember that.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, so we did a whole
And you know what? I reckon at the time I would have just put my home address in and not thought twice. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah.
I was in high school when Facebook became a thing, so I remember creating an account. I don't remember the home address, but I absolutely am confident that I totally would have put an address in and been like, sure,
yeah.
You need my address, of course.
Yeah, so we did a whole session in the Wollonga Library of, okay, everybody, we're going to log into our Facebook and we're going to take away all this personal information, So, yeah, the problem with science communication is that it can actually be really time-consuming. And people, understandably, are busy. But, there are ways to do it that, don't take hours, and there is a school of thought that science isn't finished until it's communicated.
I agree with that school of thought. And something I'm noticing as well is there's a particular demographic of people that your science communication, or maybe the work that you've done in science communication, has been directed at, right? And it's a group of people who are older in age, who tech literacy was not a given for them. What do you think science communication will look like for the coming generations once they get to that age demographic? If tech literacy is I would argue that the benchmark for tech literacy has increased over time, right? So
absolutely,
general tech literacy has gone up. However, not everybody's going to be a complete technical expert. So how do you think science communication will change for the next generation moving into that age demographic?
I think the science communication is not necessarily going to be about the tech, because the way we access all these shiny new tools will still be probably through our phones and laptops and stuff. But I think, what I would like to see is the science communication around critical thinking,
Mm.
and how to double check stuff,
Yeah, that's a really
because
good point.
in preparation for this recording, I just, Googled science communication and generative AI, and the entire first page of results, there's an article in Nature and there's all behind a paywall.
Yes, but did you also, so I have a huge, I'm not going to go into it, but I have huge rants about
Oh,
paywalls and
yeah.
having to pay for information. And really, this just pushes people to things like ChatGPT. But did you also get the AI overview that Google now does? So I'm sure everyone's familiar with this, but when you put anything into Google now, immediately what you get is the AI overview, and then you have to scroll down to get the links to things.
Yeah. And interestingly enough, the AI overview was pretty much the Wikipedia article.
Was it really?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's funny.
But I
Do you know how
think,
many times I've had to tell my students that Wikipedia is not a credible reference?
well,
My new
yeah,
one now is ChatGPT is not a credible reference.
yeah. And it's that if you don't know, you don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, yeah, so having those conversations about just because it's on the internet doesn't mean it's true. And well, who put it there and why did they put it there and what do they want you to do with it? Conversations. I gave a talk to a Country Women's Association group, which is made up of retired professionals, stay-at-home parents, also, a huge variety of women, because they wanted, what is artificial intelligence. And we actually ended up talking about loyalty cards and how if the thing is free, you are the product. And they were like, if the thing is free, you are. And I say, sure. They're gathering data on like when you shop, what you buy. And I gave the classic Walgreens story of Walgreens, which is a pharmacy in the US, sending a woman a "congratulations, you're pregnant" parcel, purely based on her purchase history, because she'd stopped buying tampons and was buying chocolate.
That's such an invasion of privacy. I would
Well,
not be happy
exactly,
if I
right?
received that parcel. I'd be like, this is creepy.
Yeah, yeah. And they were like, so look, and of course they asked me, do you have any loyalty cards? I'm like, no. I said, but I'm also single and don't have lots of children. And, the 10% discount has really no massive impact on me. So, it's about the informed consent, and just that whole notion of just understanding the implications of what it is that you're using and what it is that you're doing. I think that's going to be where a lot of science communication, and the whole, yes, this is very cool, but we're not there yet. Because, of course, companies who are developing, cancer treatments or whatever, they need investment. And so, of course, this is the next best thing and it's going to, change our lives forever. Is it? Really? How?
Could the money
And
be better
so,
spent somewhere else?
yeah, and it's just that thing of people, people want there to be cures for things and they want
Yeah.
to know and they want to understand. But yeah, I think one of the things I'm really coming across is that whole kind of critical thinking, just because it's on the internet or even just because it's in a journal, how many people were in the study, who funded the study, those sorts of things,
There's also the journal articles that are coming out I'll find them. But there are some journal articles that have come out, and basically what they've done is copied and pasted something from ChatGPT without removing the initial thing that says, here is a response to your question. So this is the other thing as well, right? We're losing that credibility. And there are broader issues. Like I could go on and on about the broader issues about academia and the publish or perish
Oh,
model,
God, yeah.
which pushes people to try and publish quickly. So something like ChatGPT, it's great for these kinds of people, right? Because they're like, I can, double the amount of publications I write because something else is writing it for me. So there are broader issues.
Yeah.
But the point still remains that it's that credibility and that integrity point, I think, that is missing when it comes to science communication.
Yeah. And I think one of the things for me is that we often talk about, oh, well, we need to train, we need to educate kids in school and, in universities. And I'm like, yeah, but what about my nana?
Mm-hmm.
Who's educating the CWA ladies? Or, are you running sessions in libraries? Are you doing something for National Science Week to help people understand your work? There are all sorts of science events and, International Day of something, are you doing something for that? Some sort of outreach, which I know takes time and effort, but that's your job. That's how I see it. If you're going to do research or develop products or services or whatever, then, people are interested. Yeah. And people want to know. And so if you help people understand, then they will be supportive, and they will understand when the government, funds something, because quite often people are like, what is that? Why are they funding that? That's weird or whatever, So if we can help the general public understand sort of what is happening behind closed doors and paywalls and stuff, then they're much more likely, I think, to be supportive. And then probably even they'll be better users of whatever products are developed.
Absolutely. And, there is the whole thing about like a forgotten generation of people. And we think about ageism and things like that in the workplace. It's like when you have nothing that is targeted to a demographic of people, it becomes very hard for that group of people to be able to grow with everyone else. Do you know what I mean? So I don't know. Anyway, I could go on and on about this kind of stuff, Alison, but I do believe there is a forgotten generation of people, and in particular, women. I look at my mum's generation. My mum came from a generation where you got married and you had babies and you stayed at home and raised your babies. That was it. That was what you did. She never had conversations about what she wanted and what she wanted to do. She just got married and had babies and took care of her because that was how it was. And so it's a forgotten generation of women who had an absence of choice for a very long time. And I think what technology does is it makes them feel like their choices are even less.
Yeah. And I know from my experience quite often they're like, well, I'm not smart enough.
Yeah.
I'm like, can you drive a car? Yeah. Okay. Well, you'll be fine.
Did you raise all of your children?
Did you raise humans and they're still here? Yeah. Okay. You'll be fine.
You can send this email. It's okay.
Yeah. Because there is this whole mystique created about technology. And I think now, particularly with artificial intelligence, it's such a broad and useless term because, like, what is it? And again, it's context as to what the artificial intelligence is. And then, if you've been to the cinema in the last 15, 20 years, then technology probably is not your friend and is probably at some point going to try and kill you. Then, no wonder people are reluctant or nervous about engaging with technology. But, if you put a human in the room and explain what the internet is and go, yeah, that was a cool film, but let me tell you why it's not a thing, then, you can build people's confidence, because people are totally competent. Like, sending an email is a repeatable task. It's the same every time. So you can teach someone the steps and they can do it, and that's great. It's rarely the competence. It's always the confidence. And so in terms of being confident to ask questions or be skeptical or just go, yeah, I can see how that's cool, but it's not for me. That unfortunately, it's time and sadly usually money. And which is why, I think libraries are amazing, because they're full of staff and volunteers who will sit with people and for an hour, and teach them how to send an email. I've done talks in libraries about what is artificial intelligence and how it's being used. And I got invited to do a talk in a library at like 2:00 on a Saturday. And I'm like, what? 2:00? Okay, it's your library. Fine.
But who is coming at 2:00 on a Saturday?
23 people came at 2:00 on a Saturday. And some of them had notebooks and they had questions and they ticked them off as they asked them, and I answered them, and it was great. So this 45-minute session ended up being almost 2 hours, which I knew would happen because people always, have questions. And then there's and what about that? And you said about the thing, and now there's the Saturday afternoon. I had nowhere to be, so it was fine. But people are interested, and there's just this assumption that because, they're over 40 or over 50, that they're not interested. They're interested. They're interested for themselves and their children and their grandchildren. And, I had lots of questions about cheating and homework, and we talked about that and what that could look like and how you can help stop that. And, so it's just that thing of it's times really good science communication can be time consuming, because you have to sit with someone and answer their really specific questions sometimes. So, but, I really enjoy that part of my work.
Well, this transitions us really nicely into the final question, which is the question that I ask all of my guests. And it is, what is one piece of advice you would give to people for engaging with technology safely and responsibly? So what is your one responsible bite?
Don't believe the hype. That's probably, because everything is going to, this new widgety gadgety thing is going to solve all our problems.
I think we still need to get a T-shirt that says "Magical Bullshit" with Alison Kershaw 2025 on it. I think that will also sum up.
I mean, and yes, artificial intelligence, it's going to do some really incredible things, but also it has massive environmental impacts.
It does.
There's the whole intellectual property issues that we're navigating, and there's privacy issues. And if you upload an article for a large language model to summarize, well, who owns the copyright of the thing that you've uploaded and the thing that is generated? We're still navigating our way through all of that. So don't believe the hype. Like, it's a terrible thing to say, but stay vigilant.
Don't
But
believe
yeah,
the hype.
pay
It's magical bullshit.
magical. Yeah, it is magical bullshit. And think of all the technologies that have come before that were gonna, I mean, I can remember, I'm over 50, so I can remember watching like towards 2000 and we were going to have the paperless office.
Mm-hmm.
If only. So now we have a hard copy and we have a soft copy, and then it gets backed up.
Because we have things called
and then-
redundancy.
yeah. And then, and, I'm a cancer patient and they're still using fax. I'm like, what is going on? And they're like, it is more secure. I'm like, let me tell you, it's not. But anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, just don't believe the hype. Like, take everything with a pinch of salt. Ask questions, find talks if that's your thing. Read stuff online from multiple sources. Think about who put it there, why they put it there, what they want you to do with that information.
That is wonderful advice. Alison, thank you so much for being on the podcast today. You've been absolutely wonderful to talk to, and all of your stories have been some of them made me want to cry, especially the crying over the email story. I still want to cry thinking about it. But you've been absolutely wonderful to talk to today. Thank you for your time, Alison.
My absolute pleasure. Thanks, Zena.